Hi EGP learners, welcome to this episode. Today we're going to talk about a concept called the hype cycle. The hype cycle is an idea that can help those of us trying to navigate the world of primary care and health technology time the adoption of new technologies for ourselves and our organisations more effectively. Now, this episode was filmed a few weeks ago, and that was before the coronavirus situation really started to heat up. It's interesting how just a few weeks and a major international crisis can really push technology and primary care forwards what feels like many years. I think if we'd filmed this episode today, right now, we would have probably placed some of these technologies quite differently on the curve. So that'll be interesting for you to see and reflect on. This is also a new format episode for us. We're experimenting with some new ways of filming and doing things, so we'd really appreciate your comments on that too. So without further ado, let's take a look at the episode.
Hey EGP learners, in this episode we're going to talk about the hype cycle and how it relates to digital primary care as tech enhance your primary care and learning. So Andy, let's talk about the hype cycle. What is it?
So the hype cycle is a graphical representation of the maturity and adoption of a new technology or trend or innovation, taking it from its inception through to widestream adoption. So it's actually a model developed by a company called Gartner in the United States. They appear to be a research and business information company who sell reports about trends and technologies. So people should go and check this out. They appear to own the intellectual property for this. So not trying to tread on your toes, Gartner. We're admiring what you've brought to the world in the form of the concept of the hype cycle.
So what's the point of the hype cycle?
So how might this be useful? So it's a useful way, I think, to conceptualise how technologies go through the journey from discovery through to becoming mainstream.
Okay.
It's important to recognise and helps us recognise that expectations and hype don't always mean that something will ultimately deliver. It's important to understand that even those technologies, or helps us understand that even those technologies that will ultimately be adopted in the mainstream often go through a trough of disillusionment or a period of time when they fall out of favour. And that's important because if you're getting behind a technology or you're involved in the development, it's important not to lose faith as things move forwards. And the main application of this, or at least in Gartner's terms, is to time your entry into a technology or a market. So we'll probably talk more about that later.
Okay, so we're going to talk about how this relates, I guess, a bit more towards digital primary care, particularly in the UK and that kind of stuff. But I guess if we're doing that, it'd be helpful to kind of explain exactly what we're looking at. So we've drawn out the hype cycle for you guys. This is what it looks like. So can you explain this lovely board to us, Andy?
I can indeed. So it's a graph. For those listening on the podcast, it will be important to open your mind and conceptualise this. We have an x-axis, which is progress through time. There is a y-axis, which goes up, and that is expectations or hype or excitement about a technology. And then we have a line that moves from the bottom left area, moving up to a high curve, and then there's a dip into a trough, and then there's a shallow increase to a second peak, which continues off to perpetuity. There are 5 key points on the hype cycle. So point 1 is the technological trigger. So this is when a new technology is discovered or invented. There might be some very early stories about it, early proof of concept, but there's not that much expectation because there's not that much knowledge about it. Point 2 is the peak of exaggerated expectations. So we often see this in the mainstream media with a new technology, and that's when there are a lot of stories about a technology, a lot of stories perhaps focusing less on tangible delivery in the here and now, but a lot about what it might do in the near future and why it's important that everybody gets involved.
So these are your big headline kind of boom, boom, boom kind of stories.
Yeah, it's when things seem to bleed out from your own industry into the mainstream, for example. And then following that, most technologies will go down a slope into the trough of, I feel like a weather person, into the trough of disillusionment. So this is where it begins to be recognised that this technology might not be delivering on all of these often unrealistic expectations and hype that's been generated. And the volume of stories will decrease. You perhaps don't hear about a technology for a while. Wonder if it's gone away. Much less known about it in this period. And then the third area is the slope of enlightenment. So this is where actually perhaps development has been going on in the background.
Mm-hmm.
Things have been moving forward, and you begin to get some positive stories again about the technology. But this time, things are more tangible than on the upward slope to the peak of expectations, and stories about things actually delivering, making a difference, beginning to be adopted. And then as things are adopted, they become more mainstream and they enter the plateau of productivity. And these are things which are just in active use day to day. And you perhaps stop thinking about them as a new technology. So that is the hype cycle.
Okay, so what are the main applications of this kind of thing then, Andy?
So as we mentioned before, timing, entry or adoption of a technology is probably, I think, the main application of this. So a lot of the people watching out there might be in decision-making positions in CCGs, primary care networks, individual practices or other organisations, controlling a budget to spend on technology or other innovations. But you need to pick which technologies to back and when to back them. So looking at this curve, I think there are two main areas really where people might enter. So some organisations or individuals or companies might want to enter sort of early in the cycle. Now, there are some risks to doing this because it's not always clear what the benefits are going to be. It's not always clear if the technology is going to survive all the way to mainstream adoption. But if you get in early, you can often capture a lot of the upside of that.
Yep.
And a lot of that upside is financial. So this might be your kind of startups or people making investments in technologies may be looking to get into a technology or a trend early. Now, other organisations, perhaps more like the ones that we would work for, there are perhaps advantages of entering later in the development or hype cycle of a product. And in healthcare, we're perhaps very interested in, do things have a proven track record? Is there an evidence base for things? Actually, there's not that much upside. More to this end. Perhaps less interested in capturing financial upside of a product or a technology, and more interested in whether it will deliver. The other element of this is cost effectiveness as well. So when something is more mature and coming up the slope of enlightenment, it's likely to have gone through a lot of development, be more cost effective, deliver more bang for the buck. Things earlier on in the hype cycle are likely to be much more expensive for what they deliver.
Potentially, it depends on what state you come in. So obviously coming in as a founder status for some of these things may end up being a lot cheaper if it ends up getting to that point. And that's the risk you're taking, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, the investments are cheaper over here. But if you're a customer, then maybe, particularly if you're a NHS-based healthcare customer, then maybe you want to more over here. Unless you want to blaze trail, which a lot of organisations might want to, and capture some of the headlines that might be associated with the peak of exaggerated expectations.
I'm going to cover some of those in a short while. But before we get to that, there's also this element of resilience that has to be played with the hype cycle, isn't there, Andy? So can you explain that to us?
Yeah, well, it's just a thought that if you're really backing a technology and you believe in it, then just kind of expect this. A lot of people might get behind it. There might be a lot of hype. This might be a nice place to be, but then there's likely to be a trough. And it's just a case of, if you really believe in it, not losing faith, pushing through until there's adoption of the technology.
This kind of sounds like a change cycle to me, Andy.
Yeah. So people might recognise the shape. So there's the Kubler-Ross change curve that looks very much like this. And I think this hype cycle is really describing a change or a transition. So Kubler-Ross change curve, it's that curve that goes through shock, denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance, and coming up to problem solving. Looks very much like that. Bit of revision there for people.
So what we're going to do for you now is show you a couple of examples of the Gartner's version of the hype cycle when it comes to technology, and particularly with regards to health and stuff. So their first one was back in 2005, and so it should be coming up on your screens right about now. And as a result of that, you can see this is what they were thinking back in 2005. So we're going to pick out a couple of these. Interesting, back then we had digital microscopy right as a tech trigger.
Which I think is
pretty much mainstream now. I mean, any smartphone can allow you to do pretty much some elements of this, and maybe just an extra camera attachment to make it more effective. But actually.
So the digital photography elements there, and I think some of the algorithmic analysis of those things are certainly coming through and maybe coming up the slope now even. We've been through the trough with that. It was a long time ago. Interesting to see tablet PCs are in the trough. And I think I see a lot of our district nurses carrying portable devices.
I mean, you can get a tablet PC for about 30-40 quid nowadays. The accessibility of the tech and the use of it definitely shifted.
So interesting. Shall we fast forward a little bit?
Yeah, we're going to jump over. So we're now going to go fast forward to 2014, so just a few years ago, and look at the hype cycle they had there. And as you can see, there's a lot more stuff on it.
There's a lot of exciting stuff going on in the areas of technological trigger and coming up the peak. Picking some things off quantum computing. That's exciting.
Yeah. And just various other things. I guess one thing that's worth looking at, so we saw a couple of these on the earlier one, but speech recognition, still all the way here at the product, plateau of productivity. Important to remember that. I'm going to come to that one in a second. But even things like natural language processing has kind of shifted a tiny bit and things, and how that impacts things moving forward.
And 2019?
So this is one of the more recent ones. This is by a slightly different company called Healthcare Digital, but it's a more recent one we've been able to find. And as you can see, well, first of all, there's less stuff on it.
Which only might be a function of that organisation wanting to create a clean slide.
So we asked you to have a look at a couple of these. So speech recognition, we're going to go straight to that one. It seems to have reversed, gone backwards in time. Do we see that sometimes, Andy?
I think perhaps the expectation of what speech recognition is and the context they're using it may be different. I think certainly dictation is pretty mainstream now, or at least it should be, just a question of cost. They're perhaps talking about more complicated elements of real-time analysis of the content of the speech and not just transcription.
So the perception of what it can do may have shifted, and therefore that's why it's gone back down the cycle. We've all got other things like Amazon for healthcare, so many people know that Amazon seems to be looking at healthcare as the next business that they want to encroach into, and how that's going to impact it. Definitely going to be seismic when it happens. And just various things like telehealth. Interesting one. They put it as plateau productivity. Would you agree with that?
Well, if they mean telephones, then I think they do. But one thinks they might mean video, which we might put somewhere else.
Well, we'll have a look at that in a second. And in fact, shall we do that now then, Andy?
Yeah.
Sorry guys, I'm dropping things left, right and centre.
So we're going to attempt to compile the EGP Learning primary care technology hype cycle for you. And we'll make it available as a slide afterwards that you might want to look at and use.
So if you guys are watching this, feel free to comment, critique, feedback and stuff. We'd love to actually hear your views on this, but this is basically what we've come up with as best as an option. So I'm going to start with something controversial, shall we say? E-consultations, Andy. Where are we going with this?
So I think trough to path, I think we'd said. I think there was a lot of excitement about this perhaps a few years ago, maybe 2017, 18. And I think we're beginning to see practices adopt this, certainly across Nottingham, in various forms. So, that's what I put it.
I agree. I think it's starting to come out of the trough, and partly because it's becoming more mainstream and stuff. So, time will tell us, I guess, but it's definitely, it's not peak, I think, but it's heading upwards and stuff. So next up, we've got its kind of sister or cousin, or whatever you want to think about it, video consultations. Where are we going with this one, Andy?
I think it's certainly on and up in terms of excitement. I'm going to put it at the peak of expectations, largely because I think the expectations of the impact of video consultations may be being exaggerated. I would
agree with you. Despite the fact that I love video consultation, what they can do, and video mechanisms, I think from a prospect of benefit to patients, there's a lot of hype around it, definitely. No one would disagree with that. It is mainstream from next year to a degree, because it's a contractual part of what we have to do as GPs, but its applications in primary care, I think there's definitely some groups that will benefit massively. I think the concept that everybody will benefit from this is, maybe not as great.
It's an interesting one.
So next up, we've got AI, artificial intelligence. Where are we going with this, Andy?
I think it's coming down towards the trough, actually, at the moment. I think 2018, there was an awful lot of hype about AI. Babylon were sort of riding high. They're still around and doing excellent disruptive work, good disruptors. But I think we're all talking a little less about AI, or we perhaps should be. So, peak to trough. I'm sure it will be delivering all sorts of things. I think it is already delivering all sorts of things in various forms, depending on how you define AI, and our episode on that is probably quite interesting.
Yeah, so go check that out if you want to. But yeah, I agree. I think it's heading down towards the trough, if not already in the trough itself. So we saw this on the earlier one, so we've got voice transcription that we wanted to talk about. Where do you think this is heading towards?
I think it's plateau.
Yeah, path to plateau. I think, that, like you said, it depends on how you categorise it. I think if you're looking at the concept of it being able to interpret and do a bit more than just a voice to text, then it may be a bit further towards this end. But from what it does, actually a lot of the systems around are really good, effective and time-saving in that respect. Okay, something a bit more effective. Electronic prescription services and stuff. So this is the EPS4 in particular we're going to talk about. Where would you pop this?
Okay, I think we're all using it a lot where we're not using it. There's probably a good reason why we're not using it for certain patients.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's been a successful technology.
Yeah, it does what it says, and actually it's proving more and more benefits as time goes on. Similarly, we've got mobile working. Where are we going with this one, Andy?
I think I might change that. I think it's coming towards the plateau. I think we're doing it a lot, but I think we will see a lot more mobile working perhaps in the future. Perhaps augmented by things like video consultations. I can imagine people doing more clinical, direct patient contact work from other locations like their own home.
I agree with that. I think it's heading towards the plateau productivity, and particularly as remote working becomes more of a thing, and work-life balance as well. But there's potentially more that could be done. Right, next up we've got the digital assistants. So we've got people like Alexa, Google Home and Siri. Where are we going with this one, Andy?
I think it's coming up the peak. So I think tech trigger to peak. I think there's a lot more that it will be able to deliver.
Possibly, yeah. It's interesting because there's obviously issues about data privacy and stuff that come with these, but obviously last year Alexa got the contract to work with one service in terms of providing that kind of integration and stuff. So we are going to see more of this happen and change as time goes on. Right, next up we've got VR. Let's go with that one, shall we? So virtual reality, and a massive shout out to Keith Grimes, our colleague, and our episode that we did with him. And he may disagree with us on this one, potentially.
Yeah, no, you might agree. I think it's coming up a
little bit higher up the peak, shall we say? But not quite at the top.
I think so. For clinical applications, I think a lot of the time I think these things have little peaks and troughs, but I think there's a lot that it will deliver in the future.
So next up we've got wearables. Okay, now this is a bit harder to define because there's obviously clinical wearables, there's consumer wearables, so we're going to kind of encapsulate all of them. Where are we going with this one, Andy?
So we said tech trigger coming up the curve, I think.
Yeah.
That's what we said.
But I think when we thought about this a bit more, we thought, actually, is it somewhere else potentially?
Gandhi, where did we say?
We were actually saying they might even be heading towards a slope of enlightenment to a degree. I think the challenge with this one is that concept versus clinical versus consumer wearables.
I think we've done ourselves a disservice, and the category is too broad, Gandhi.
Exactly.
That's what's happened here.
So for this one, we're going to leave this up to you guys. Okay. We're going to actually ask you, where would you put wearables from a healthcare perspective? And for now, we're just going to stick it right in the middle because we're not quite sure. We debated this one. Okay, something a bit more decisive, shall we say? Genomics. Where are we going with this, Andy?
Near the tech trigger,
definitely.
I think.
So relatively new, particularly from a primary care perspective. Yeah. I think for personalised medicine, it's slightly different, and for other specialities, probably a bit different. But for primary care, we're still, from our perspective, at the earlier stage. And again, check out our episode on this that we did last year.
I think the public. I think in a few years we will find the public a lot more excited and enthused about this than they are now. And then we may find that actually the delivery of it is much more complicated than people thought. We'll have a trough, and then we'll be doing stuff around which drugs work on which people best in the future.
So we've got 3 more to go, guys. Next up is something definitely a bit more techie: blockchain.
Let's put that in the trough.
Yeah.
I mean, this one might have passed people by even, but Bitcoin is blockchain technology. And a few years ago, I remember people talking a lot about how this might be applicable for digital patient health records and things. I never quite got my head around how it would work. I'd love to do an episode on blockchain just because it's a little bit mind blowing.
Yeah.
But I think it's in the trough. I think the technology is clever, and I think we might find that it begins to underpin some of the other technologies as they emerge. But I think as a hyped up entity in itself, I think it may just stay in the trough forever and just be powering some of the other technologies going forwards.
And if you're someone that disagrees with that, if you're someone that thinks that there's actually an amazing application for this in primary care health technology, contact us. Let us know. We'd be more.
Well, we'd like to talk to you.
Yeah, definitely. So we've got 2 more left, guys. And for the next one, we're going to depart slightly from the tech side of it and focus more on the primary care side of things. Primary care networks. So we talk about this a lot at the moment, don't we? And I think justifiably so. So where are we going to pop this one, Andy?
I think it's at the peak of expectations because primary care networks appear to be the answer to everybody's problems.
Yeah.
Fortunately, at the moment, you go to meetings and other community providers say, oh, yeah, the primary care networks will sort that. And there's a lot of expectation about what primary care networks may do. So I think it's at the peak.
I agree with you. I think it's at the peak, but I think it's right at the precipice of the trough of disillusionment. And the reason for this is, so we actually thought that this went through a peak, it had a mini trough, and it got back to a peak. And this is because of what happened with the contract negotiations that we saw. And yeah, are we going to see another trough hit us? Time will tell. Hopefully not, but we will have to wait and see.
I think there'll be a period when it's not delivering on expectations, and those of us who are invested as we're clinical directors, will have to show some resilience and stay the course.
Yeah, and last but not least, interoperability, a thing that we talk about quite a lot on this channel.
Yeah, so I've got quite just thinking about where to place on the graph. So I think my expectations are low about when this will be delivered, and the timescale keeps dragging on. I don't know if we can place something on the sort of plateau of disillusionment, never going to happen. That's probably not a real place, is it? Is it sort of
I think you're right. For us, it's right at the bottom of the trough of disillusionment. And I think the reason it's there is just this absolute frustration that we've been told it's going to come out of here for years and years and years, and it's not shifting. Now, hopefully with things like GP Connect, we will finally see it start to head up the slope of enlightenment. And I guess the main reason we're frustrated with this one, isn't it, is that this probably has the impact to shift every single one of these a good few places to the right, because actually it will fuel a lot of the tech.
I think it's an enabler, isn't it? You think how this fuels into off-site e-consultations, off-site processing of AI, mobile working, video consultations.
Network working as well, massively. All of these will shift that way if this works properly. And right now in primary care health tech, we're not quite there yet, long and short of it. But
will we ever be?
Well, we'll have to wait and see.
Hold the course, be resilient.
Yes, we'll try and stay the course. So, EGP, we hope you've really enjoyed this episode. As we said, all the kind of stuff and content and show notes and everything is down below if you want to check it out and things. And we will produce a more effective slide of this for you guys to have a look at and stuff. In terms of being able to contact us, we'd love it if you would. Do you agree? Do you disagree with what we've said and done and all that kind of stuff? If not, well, tell us. We'd love to hear what you're thinking. And as always, you can contact us whatever process you want. Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, on
all of them.
Yeah, podcasting platforms. We'd love it if you could leave a review for us. Definitely on iTunes. It kind of gives us a bit more metrics and feedback.
And if you're watching on YouTube, click subscribe and ring the bell, as everyone says in their videos.
And leave a comment, because we promise to reply to the comments that you leave us and stuff. And we are keen to know what you think of our version of the digital primary care hype curve.
And the format of these new shorter episodes.
Exactly.
So, thanks very much.
As always, contact us what you want, and we will catch you in the next episode.
Bye-bye.